Thank you all for joining for today's webinar. We are having some people still logging on, but since it's time to start, we will start. My name is Omar Kleijer, within Runbook, responsible for services for the implementations of our customers. And our today's topic is how can Runbook help you if you're working in a shared service center organization. In general, we have two types of companies. One which already have a shared service center, and what we also see is that a lot of companies are moving towards a shared service centers. The main key challenges most of the companies have at the moment you outsource something, whether it's insourced or outsourced, but you want to do it in a central way in a shared service center. You would like to standardize your processes. What I quite often see is that you have companies have standardized it within the region, but let's say if India is also take over, for example, only Europe instead of, for example, Asia or the US, then you also need to align on the general consensus of the process. So the standardization is really important, and how are you making sure that everybody is following that same process? Then you have the activity split. So what do you want to do centrally and what do you want to do locally? Where are the dependencies? Who is dependent on what? What kind of activities can you do centrally, and where do you still have that local knowledge and you really need to do on local basis? Now, the moment you are running a certain process, you always want to have a status update online real time to see what the status is. In a lot of areas, you also would like to store documentation. For example, you are running your close process, you have some internal controls embedded in your process, whether it's for external reporting or internal reporting, or maybe to measure your KPIs. If you have an outsourced shared service center and you want to do some measurements, how the shared service center is performing, you can build in controls. Now, within those controls, of course, you also would like to have the evidence to measure the quality, because you don't want to decrease in quality the moment you're moving to a shared service center. So it's important to store your documentation in some areas. I will explain during this webinar how we can provide the supporting documentation, how the end users can add it to the certain steps, and how you can view it from the management point of view. And at the end, you would like to embed as much as knowledge into a solution. What we have seen is that it can be quite a high turnover of personnel in your shared service centers. It can be that you have a 60% turnover rate where the people come and go. So then it's important to basically embed the quality, because you don't want to decrease the quality the moment people are moving away to another company. So what we have seen with quite some customers is that they want to embed knowledge out of the people into a solution. And we are using that in our automation technology. So basically, to give you an example, what we do is we predefine variants. So we predefine what kind of reporting they need to run. And potentially also we predefine what the outcome can be based on thresholds. The moment you're using that kind of technology, you have a less risk if people are moving to another position or moving to another company. Now, what do we offer? We have a financial close module, a safe controls to execute your control framework, and a true reconciliation to do your account reconciliation file. Down below you see some of our customers. Quite some customers have a shared service center. For example, Procter & Gamble, Novartis, Siemens is also a customer. So they all have shared service centers. So they have the challenge on one side, they want to execute some activities locally, but on the other hand, they want to the high volume activities they want to do in a central way in the shared service center. And how do you streamline that out of your headquarters? How do you predefine that process? How do you embed it? That's the main topic for today. Now, some quotes from our existing customers. Procter & Gamble, new automation technologies and Runbook eliminate human errors and takes care of discipline. That's the part of the automation I just explained. So within Procter & Gamble, we have automated quite some activities. So the moment it's outside the threshold, somebody needs to do, and if it's within the tool itself will sign off the step, it attaches the evidence behind the step, and you can continue with the process. Control over global shared service center is not possible without Runbook. Novartis is using it not only for close, but also for their execution of the whole business control framework, and also for their account reconciliation file. So these are just some quotes from our customers. Now, if we look at closing can be quite complex if you are within a huge organization. On one side, you have your shared service center, you have a process owner, you have your corporate IT, who is maybe running some jobs in the background. You have your compliance part, so everybody needs to fulfill the compliance. So basically, there is a strong line between the compliance part and your organization, your shared service center. At the end, and the moment you perform your financial close, you need to move to consolidation. So when do they get design where they can start with the consolidation? So there is a continuous interaction between all these different departments. Then it can be, although you have a shared service center, that you still have the local financial accounting departments in the local regions. So where is the interaction? What are we going to do in the shared service center, and what can we do still locally, or what do we need to do locally? If we are talking about close, we can also debate on what is the full scope of the close. Some companies say we only want to do the finance processes, so let's say the GL, AP, AR, treasury banking, and some controlling activities. In other companies to say we want to have the full scope, including the logistic part, the warehouse part, sales part, production, etc. So at the end, if you are performing the close, you can see that you have a lot of activities across all these different departments, and the challenge is to streamline this. Now, what do we do to streamline this whole process? We are standardizing the closing checklist and deploy, let's say, the master template to the regions. So, for example, if you already have a shared service center, then you probably already have a master template. We basically ensure that your master template is being copied down to each region, let's say at the end your legal entity, and we will drive your standardization because they cannot change it. If you are moving to a shared service center, what we also have done with quite some customers is that you can see that most of the time it happens with roll-ins of companies. So let's say you are rolling in with batches of 10 company codes, or maybe country per country, and then you can use that master template to enforce that standardization, and it can help you to basically streamline your process and keep the quality the moment you move towards a shared service center organization. Now, how do we do that? We automate as much as activities as we can. If we can basically standardize on the process, standardize on the type of report we are going to run, and also standardize on the thresholds, we can build one template and dynamically copy it down to all the legal entities. That means that you only have maintenance in one place. So for example, if you want to run a balance sheet for 5 legal entities, now everybody's creating their own variant, so you have 5 in the system. If you are going to work with one, we build one variant, we dynamically populate the right company codes, and the moment our guidelines are changing, you only need to change it in one place. Because in the implementing a tool is of course nice to streamline your process, to automate the process, and to monitor the process, but at the end everybody knows that in all the companies all the processes are changing, so you also need to be able to easily maintain it. We also ensure the backup functionality, especially if you are in a shared service and you have a big team. People can be sick out of the office, moving to another location, or maybe having issues with solving the problem. So we ensure that there always is a backup assigned to each activity. Next to that, we build in dependencies to streamline the process. And coming back to that master template, we basically define the first pre-close activity, still the last step within the close before you move to consolidation across all the different departments. And each time you perform your close, you always have a certain sequence where you need to execute all your closing activities. And that sequence we can enforce by using the dependencies. So for example, Manila can only start with some activities at the moment. Some activities in New York have been performed, so there is a hard dependency. The people in Manila cannot start if the step in New York is not performed. So by using that kind of technologies, we enforce that everybody is following the same process. If we are talking about automation, it means that, let's say, the first 5 steps has been executed, the next 10 steps can run automatically. So Runbook can also run activities based on events. Now, as mentioned before, ISO maintenance is really important. Having a tool is nice, but the maintenance is maybe even more important at the end, the moment you have implemented, because organizations are continuously changing. It can be that you do roll-ins of more processes to the shared service center. Maybe processes are changing to make it more efficient, and you need to be able to adapt your checklist according to that. So you need to have a lot of maintenance solutions. Now, over the years, we have gained quite some experience in this. So we have built a lot of Excel interface solutions. So the moment you want to apply a change to 200 steps, what you can do is make a download to Excel, adjust the activities in Excel and upload it into Runbook, SAP again. So you don't need to change all those activities manually. And that's most of the time a one-time event. We always say the moment you implement it, you upload all the activities in Runbook and then it's integrated. But the moment you have, let's say, a March change to your process, you really want to redefine it, then you always have the ability to download and later on upload it again to make it more user-friendly. Now, a lot of our customers have multiple SAP systems, so we also have the possibility to connect SAP systems to each other. So if you have company codes which are going across SAP systems, then you have, let's say, the first 50 steps in system A, the next 50 steps in system B, then we can create a dependency between system A and B. If we are talking about global reporting, one of our customers, they have 14 different SAP systems. Out of headquarters, they want to have an update status every 2 hours, and we are using BW. So every 2 hours, we do a full BW refresh to have an online real-time status. Of course, you can also do reporting in the ERP system directly. It depends on the needs. Now, how do we manage the flows? What do? We build one master checklist, and what we do is we copy this checklist down to your reporting units. In most cases, the lowest level is the company code, because at the end, most companies close per company code, but it can also be that you have a different setup. So it's not tied to the company code structure in SAP. You are flexible. For example, if you want to create a plant close because of the different ownership, you can create one master template for your plant close activities and you copy it down to your plants. So if you have, for example, one legal entity rolls up to 5 plants and another legal entity rolls up to 3, then you can also make that cross-link dependencies. Now, we predefine the level of standardization. So let's say we have 100 activities in the master template, and we say out of these 100, 80% are mandatory for each legal entity. Then the moment we copy it down to business unit 1, those 80 steps are always in there. They cannot change it. We also have some flexibility because, for example, in some regions you have really local specific activities which you may not want to incorporate in the master template but only want to add it to the business unit 1. Then you can say, okay, I want to keep those 80 steps, but into addition we want to add then local mandatory steps in there as well. So you can still enforce your standardization through the template, but you will not lose your flexibility on the local level to comply to local or legal statutory reasons. You can also measure the similarities and differences. The moment you have integrated this into the solution, you can run a report across these regions and see what kind of local activities they have added to the steps. And what you can see, if they are all similar, what you can do, you can bring them into the master template and copy them down. So instead of having, let's say, 80 steps mandatory, then you have 85. And by doing that, you really have a practical way of moving to, let's say, the ideal closing template. You also have a lot of global milestones. So we can see either companies want to group activities by day. So all pre-close activities are done, all the activities on working day 1. But it can also be that based on process ownership, you want to have, okay, all the milestones for all the fixed asset related activities are completed, or all the general ledger activities. So you are flexible in creating your own views, group activities by using milestones or different ways for reporting purposes. Now, if we look at the close, most activities find place in week 4 or week 1. And what we see quite often is the red line. Closing always is in peak period at the end of the month and in the beginning of the next month. By looking at that process, looking at the certain sequence of activities, and in combination what you want to do centrally and what you want to do decentrally, we predefine that process by using the dependency. So we are enforcing that checklist that people cannot start in Manila once again and before we have executed those activities in New York. But also, let's say you can automate your process up to 70 or 80%. And by using those two, so either the predecessors but also the automation, you can reduce the peak period to a lower level. What we also can see is that a lot of companies are creating weekly scenarios. If you look at the close, it mainly takes place in the last week of the month and the first week of the next month. But you can also predefine what you're going to do in week 2 and 3. So what we can see is that some of our companies are now creating weekly scenarios, so they predefine what you need to check in week 2 and basically what you need to do in week 3 to decrease the number of errors you have, for example, on your suspense account, intermediate account, and these kind of things. So if you already start clearing those up in the second and the third week of the month, you basically reduce the peak in the real closing time. By doing that, you can of course increase your closing time, but you can also increase your quality because people have more time to do the analysis instead of basically running all the execution of their activities. In general, we see 3 phases. The first phase is the manual activity. So on one side, you have your SAP system. The moment you move to the second phase, you're going to work with Runbook. Runbook is fully integrated inside SAP. We are an SAP Gold partner. So the moment you upload that checklist, it's integrated in your SAP, and you're going to execute your activities from Runbook. You're going to store your evidence in Runbook. So basically, you keep everything in your SAP system. And the moment we look at phase 3, we're really going to look at all your activities and which ones we can automate. For example, if you are using a profit center accounting ledger, one check in the month is that you check your FI ledger with your PCA ledger and it should be 0. Those kind of activities you can run automatically. If it is 0, it will sign off automatically. If it's not, it will send you an email that you need to check that account because there are still line items on that account. One other thing is, for example, if you have done the last step, the next step can, for example, be close the period and reopen the next period. That is something we can also kick off by using standard SAP in combination with Runbook. So it eliminates a lot of manual activities. And also, if we are talking about automation, it can be that you are now scheduling a lot of activities, or your IT department is scheduling activities, and the business is performing those activities. So what we also do is basically bring those 2 departments into one. So the moment the IT is scheduling the activities, Runbook can take that over, and the moment it's finalized, the traffic light will automatically go to green and it will release the steps for the business. So you don't have that time lag anymore when the IT is scheduling activities. They store the output on a certain file, a network drive, or maybe they will send it over by mail. It's now all integrated in one solution. Now let me quickly go to the system to just show some highlights, as we only have 40 minutes in total, so 20 minutes left. It's just a highlight what we can do. If you want to have more information or more detailed demonstration, you can send an email to us. At the end of the presentation, you will find my email address and you can send us an email. As mentioned, Runbook is an SAP add-on. We are a Gold partner, so we have our own namespace. The main transaction code of Runbook is /PXY/RB0. The moment I push that transaction code, I enter the main screen. I will start with the most simple report we have, but it gives you a good idea how we are performing the close. So what we can see in here is we have all the closing activities. Each closing activity gets a step number, and we can see that we have 4 columns in here. The first column is, let's say, the corporate column. So some activities you will not perform on the company code level, but you want to perform it on a higher level. Let's say if you want to do an upload of the currency rates, you don't need to do it per company code, and that's a one-time event. So you can say, okay, I want to assign it to the, let's say, the master template, the corporate level. Now, the moment you have defined all your closing activities, you can copy them down to a company code. So in my demonstration, in this demonstration version, I have a checklist and I've copied it down to company code RBO1, RBO2 and RBO3. And the moment I do my copy down, I can determine whether I need to have that step for that company code or maybe it's not applicable. So for example, if I have documented all my steps, my sales steps, my plant steps, my financial steps, and I only have a sales organization, then it can be that I want to deactivate my plant activities because they are not applicable for that company code. So that is a one-time event. I always say that's the activation matrix of the steps. So you predefine which activities are applicable for which company code. That is a one-time event you do in the system, and then the system will keep in mind which steps need to be activated for which company codes. By doing this, of course, you also ensure your data quality and your standardization, because the moment you do the copy down, you predefine which activity need to be executed for that company code. Now we can already see that some of the activities are on green. The traffic light red means initial, so not started. In the middle we have yellow, that means started but not finished, and at the end we have green, so we can see that we have some steps already on green. The yellow lines in this overview are milestones, so we are grouping all the pre-close activities. So if all these steps are on green, the milestone will automatically hit green, and the moment the milestone goes to green, you can send out an automated email to the responsible manager. But for example, this is a milestone for the asset management, so the moment all the asset management activities are completed, the milestone will also go to green. So you can also monitor different on different levels. Now, the line I've just selected is the top line. That is, let's say, my master scenario. That's the corporate checklist. And we have deployed it to company code RBO1, RBO2, and RBO3. Now let's look at the activities of company code RBO1. And the moment I enter the checklist, I get the overview. So basically, Runbook is the dashboard to execute all my close activities. The first column is the execution icon column. So people can see whether they are a primary operator or a backup operator. Each step gets a unique step number. Steps can be dependent on each other, so in this case step 30 is dependent on step 10 and 20. So you can see that it's dependent on step 10 on the corporate level and step 20 on company code RBO1. So you can also make cross-link company code dependencies. Now, because you need to predefine your predecessors, Runbook can calculate automatically the next steps. So if I don't execute step number 10 on the corporate level, then I cannot start with step 30 on company code RBO1, step 82 on company code RBO2 and RBO3. So you can also determine your critical path. Then we have the status. Red, initial. Yellow in the middle means started but not finished, and green at the end means finished. We have a short step description. To each activity we assign a responsibility group, and within that group we assign the SAP user IDs. We upload all this data from SU01, so it automatically picks up your email address, your phone number. You can define who is a backup operator, so in this case we have one secondary operator user, and we can also predefine who needs to receive emails. We can also integrate some transaction codes, some operational procedures, so that means there is no interaction with SAP. We can automatically trigger activities. That means that this red and white ball means that we're going to automate an activity. If we click on it, we can see what kind of report we're going to run. We can also integrate the workflow. So if you have dependencies, for example, step 50 is dependent on step 40. Now let's say I am sitting in Germany, in Munich, and my colleagues in Manila in the shared service center are dependent on me. Then they don't need to log on to Runbook each time and push refresh to check if I have already executed my activity. You can see that an email is being sent. The step is on green, so the moment I select it to green, it sends an email to my colleagues in Manila so they can start with their activity. So we have an integrated workflow. You can also integrate your process guidelines, work instructions. You can either upload it into Runbook or you can link it to SharePoint or any document management system. We can also put some comments in there, especially for the end users. This is really important. They can put in the comments like, for example, they are not responsible for this step. They would like to have a different step. Maybe they want to have an automated step, etc. So they can put all the feedback in there. So after the close, somebody can run a report over all these notes and use that for the first evaluation of your close. So it's really valuable to get this information out of the people to basically change the process. And of course, the business process owner needs to approve on the change, but at least you can get the feedback from the users. Now the next column is the internal control column. I will come back at the moment we're going to discuss the internal control module. And then we have the log column. So we will trace everything which is being done by the user. So you have the full audit file as well. And then we, for each step, we predefine an earlier start time, a later start time, and an end time. And so we use these times for the execution, so you can see whether you can start with a step or not. And later on, we can also use it for monitoring to check if we are running on time or running late. Of course, we also have some standard reports. I will quickly show you one report before we move to the internal control module. This is also a system, a report you can use to do online real-time cross-system monitoring. So if you have multiple SAP systems and you don't want to wait till BW is updated, you can also run this directly into the system. Of course, you need to take into account how much data you're going to pull from the system performance-wise, but it's no problem. If your system is capable of do online reporting across 5 SAP systems, then the system is able to do that. What do we see here? Basically the same setup as in the beginning with the traffic light overview. We have one corporate view, which we have copied down to 3 company codes, RBO1, RBO2, and RBO3. We can see the overall status. We can see if they have started late and ended late. We can see the total number of steps. The steps not started as a number and as a percentage, how many steps are running, how many steps are finished, how many started late, ended late, and how many steps are applicable for internal control. In this case 7, 1 is signed off, so that's 14%. And we can actually do a full drill down to all the steps. So this is basically, I always say, the slice and dice report, and you have different views looking at the same data. But as long as you execute everything out of Runbook, and you can also pull all the data out, not only how to execute, but also how it's executed previous month according to next month, etc. This is a short highlight about the closing module. We will now move to our next part, and that's the internal control module. And we have started, let's say, 12, 13 years ago with the close module. At a certain moment, we got the question from our customers. And within our close, we have a lot of activities which are also part of our SOX control framework. So we need to document what we have done. So what we have basically done is added a little template to the existing step for the close, which we have mapped with the business control framework. So the moment people were executing their close activities, they were also signing off on the internal control steps. And by doing that, it gives us the opportunity to basically inform the control owners that they have executed their activities. I will briefly explain this picture. The bottom part can represent your shared service center. Within your shared service center, you're performing your FICO activities, your purchasing, your inventory, your production, your treasury, and your HR, and maybe some more processes as well. These processes are being executed centrally, and it can be that your business function owners are sitting locally. So there is a lot of communication and dependencies between those two. It's a little bit like the same with closing activities, only now it's applicable for internal control. So let's say the shared service center is performing an activity. The moment it's completed, it sends automatically an email to the business owner. He can review and approve or disapprove. And the moment he signs off on the control, it basically gives a signal to the internal control who can do an independent check. So basically they can drill down to the information of which the shared service center has initially executed and which is reviewed by the business process owner. So you have the 4I principle and you have the internal audit or the external audit who is going to do an independent check, see if all the controls are being executed. And the moment you have embedded your business control framework in your day-to-day activities, so the shared service center is executing their steps. So let's say you have a process, purchase to pay, which consists of 20 activities to perform that whole cycle. Out of these 20, you nominate 3 key points in that process of 20 steps which are applicable for your control. And for those 3, it will feed the results to the business owner and they can basically sign off on that step. And the moment you have executed those 3 steps for, let's say, all your 50 or 500 legal entities, you basically have the full scope overview of your controls, and you can also do your analysis. So the moment you have executed all your controls, you also have your external, internal auditors reviewing the process. You can give your statement of control to the board. Now what do? We embed your controls in the daily processes, so it's not additional work which you need to do, but we are looking at the processes and we nominate the key points. And we will trigger the users in the shared service centers to execute the controls. What I have quite often see is that let's say you have certain controls, they only need to be executed on a quarterly basis, but people forget that they need to execute. So we can trigger those users, we can send them an email, okay, it's now a quarterly close, you need to execute these controls. And the moment the controls are being executed, we will inform the control owner or the process owner to review and also to sign off. So we also inform the control owners when the people in the shared service center have executed their controls. Of course, if possible, we will automate the control. So basically you eliminate the first part that people are running reports, doing interpretation and either sign off or not sign off, depending on the control results. And we can potentially also automate the process. And at the end we will use the test module for, let's say, out of headquarters to do the full audit. So you can also do the independent check. So Runbook makes sure the controls are being executed, so the performance which can take place in your shared service center. We are signing off on the controls, so we will do the assessment and that can be done locally. And at the end we can do the independent check, so let's say the audit out of the headquarters to basically fulfill the full control cycle. Now what is Runbook exactly doing? First of all, you need to design your control framework. That is something you probably already have or you're designing at the moment you are moving to a shared service center to measure on KPIs and to keep the quality high. And the moment you have designed it, then what Runbook can do, you can build out a template with activities like in the closing. So you define each control as a separate step, or if that step already exists in your close, you only need to map it to that step. So the moment you execute your close activity, you also sign off on your controls. So we make sure that the controls are being performed, whether it's locally or in the shared service center, it doesn't matter. Right? Runbook has the total picture. The control owners, they can assess the control, and at the end the internal audit can review those 2 sections. So you have the full cycle of the controls. How do we do that? We create steps in Runbook, we map them with a control ID. Within that control ID, you can document for which control process or business process and sub-process it's applicable, the control type, whether it's a manual control, a segregation of duty control, an automated IT control. You can define the risk area, you can define whether it's key control or non-key. What I've seen over the years is, let's say in 2004, 2005, when the SOX guidelines came in, there was let's say, a lot of controls you need to be executed. After a while it was more realistic, so some of the key controls went to non-key. It was not mandatory, but of course it can be the moment you see that your process is not compliant in all parts, that you want to make a non-key a key again, and then it appears in this list again. So you can also be quite flexible in activating or deactivating key or non-key. This overview will show you the internal control status, so whether that control is being executed and what the control results are. And you can see some green lights and some yellow lights and some red lights. You can also see if remediation is being taken care of. You can also see if the control is related to an activity in SAP. The moment it is, you can predefine which report they need to run with which variant, and which thresholds they are gonna measure. Potentially you can then automate if you have all these values, but of course you also have a lot of controls which are not applicable to an SAP program or transaction code, so it's basically a manual activity you need to do. Now behind each step of runbook, let's say the normal step, we define the control template, and within the control template you document the control ID. You define the control owner responsibility group, so that's a different group than, let's say, the normal step group. You predefine what kind of controls they can enter, what the corporate entity is, what the business process is, and the sub-process. This control can have impact on a certain balance sheet account group, the type of control, the significance factor, risk carrier, and IC objective. So basically all the master data of the control, and this is something you need to define once and then you can deploy it. So if this control is applicable for your 500 legal entities, then you define this only once, and out of this template you map it to your existing steps. So let's say your control definitions are changing, it's not an IT manual control, but it's going to be an IT automated control, because we can automate a control. It is something we only need to define in this control template, and it will be updated in all the 500 company codes. So it's also ease of maintenance again. Now, one side, it's important to basically document your master data of the control, but of course it's also important to have a proper test plan. So explain in quite some detail what you expect from the people in the shared service center, how they execute the control. My experience is the better you predefine what you expect from them. So document, please run report A, check it again, these thresholds. If it's event number 1, please put it on yellow. If it's case number 2, put it on green. If you do that, then the audit later on will be way more easy, because you really explain what you expect from an end user. Otherwise they may add a lot of documentation. They think the more they add, the happier your audit will be. But the auditor, then it's difficult for him or her to find the proper evidence, so they need to scroll through all the documents. So the test plan is really important. And the moment you have created the test plan, also document what kind of evidence they need to attach to the step. So it's also clear for the auditor against control number 5.1.3.3. I always have 5 documents which the shared server is going to add to the step. Now, and of course, the automation part is really important. It's like in closing, it's a step-by-step approach. You can either decide, okay, we have 100 controls. Out of these 100, we want to automate only 2. Then you start with 2 and you can increase over time. Or you can say, we are now implementing our control framework. We want to do it as far as automated as possible. So we look at those 10 controls and we say, okay, 8 of them we can completely automate and they will run automatically for you. I will quickly show you how the integration of the internal control framework is in Runbook. I will go back to the checklist and I will go into this step. This is, for example, a confirmation of an exchange rate. That's a typical closing activities, but also an activity you need to document, because it can be that your auditor wants to see what kind of values you have entered in the second period of this year, for example. So we can see that this template is signed off. I can click on this template, and as you can see, this is all grayed out because this control is being executed, so I cannot reopen unless I have authorization to do. But we can see that the end users have done a sign off, so they put it on green, step on green. They have put in some comments that they have updated the table. They also have attached some evidence to that step. Now we can go to the attachment button and view the documentation. So what we can see in here is that we have some supporting documentation, a PDF file. In this case, it's a PDF file, it can be a Word, an Excel, or a PowerPoint. If we go to the master data of the control, we can go to this tab. So behind this tab, the moment the people in the shared service center are signing off on this closing step, they're also signing off on the control. And here we can see that we have the control ID, the responsibility group. So this can be the control owner who is sitting locally, either in Amsterdam, New York, or another place. We can see for which corporate entity this is applicable, what kind of business process, maybe a sub-process, and the type of control. So you have different fields you can use to do your mapping with your existing framework. It's not mandatory to use them all. So you can also, if you are building up a business control framework, you can say, okay, we will start with a business process and control ID and business process owner and the type of control, and later on we can extend it if needed. But the moment you create these templates, then you can also do some reporting. I will pick an existing variant I have just to show what kind of report capabilities Runbook has. Of course, in the selection screen, you can already select what kind of controls or steps you want to see. For example, only to the general ledger area, and maybe only to a company code 1 till 50. But in this case, this is an interactive report, so in the report itself, I can make a selection criteria as well. Because this is only to give you a highlight, I will not go into so much detail. I will just run this report to show you the moment you embed all your activity into Runbook, what kind of strong reporting you can do. So in this case, I have my headquarters and my 2 company codes. I can drill down to a certain process. Now let's say I'm going to drill down to my business process, and I can see I have a business process order to cash, and I have 14 controls related to that process. Out of these 14, I have 6 steps which are pending, 8 are signed off. Out of these, I have 7 which are on green, so there is fine, everything is fine. I have 1 on yellow and 6 on red. Now maybe me, as let's say I'm an auditor, I only want to look at the red ones. I can click and I can see that I have that control for company code RP02 for the different periods. So we always have the same issue in the same company. I can do my drill down to the template again. I can view the documentation, etc., etc. So the moment you put it into Runbook, you can map your controls which are applicable to your financial close within your close process. For all the other controls, you can create a different checklist, but at the end you can do global reporting over all these controls and either do a search on controls which are not signed off, controls which are on green. You can do the drill down to the different processes or sub-process or type of controls. So as long as you maintain those master data of the controls and you ensure that they're being executed out of Runbook, you can run reports like this out of your system online real time. Now we are moving to the last part, and that's the reconciliation in Runbook. We started with close, we extended with internal controls, and 4 years ago we had a customer who was building up a shared service center, and they were looking at some solutions for their closing process, and they asked us, okay, closing is nice, but at the end we need to show our auditors an account reconciliation file. So we basically need to clarify our balances on each account according to our prepared by client list, which our auditor gave to us. Next to that, we also have our own requirements everybody needs to fulfill. And we also would like to do that in a central way. So at the moment we are building up that shared service center, we can immediately deploy it via Runbook and make sure that everybody is following the same guidelines. So what we have done, we have built our solution. And within that solution, we have created 4 different roles. Actually, there are 5, but the coordinator is only the administrator. So for example, in SAP, people are creating new accounts. These accounts need to be added to our account hierarchy in our account reconciliation solution, which is Runbook integrated in your SAP system. But somebody, of course, needs to do that mapping, and that's the coordinator. Then, in some companies, we can see that we have 4 different roles. The light blue area on the left is the shared service center. So the preparer and the reconciler are in the shared service center, and within the business, so it can be locally, we have a reviewer and an account owner. And basically, the moment the preparer is performing the activity, the reconciler receives an email that he can start with his or her activities, and after that it will send an automated email to the reviewer, and at the end it can send an email to the account owner. If you don't have that 4-layer process, you can also say we only have a reconciler and an account owner, so you only activate 2 roles in the whole system. So what you can do system-wide is predefine, okay, we only have 2 roles and nothing else, or you can say we activate all 4 and per account group, and we predefine whether we want to have 4, 2 or maybe 3 roles active. So you're really flexible, and that's, let's say, the master data. So at the moment you have set it up, you don't need to do it every period, then it's fixed. Now every role has a separate tab, so they can view each other's comments, also the attachments, but they cannot change the evidence, of course. So it's a matter of segregation of duty, how much authorization you have to be able to view or change data. Now we have created a little picture because in some cases it's difficult to explain the process and what we can do in one book. But in principle, what we do is we predefine the whole mapping of the general ledger. You have your balance sheet and your P&L. Your balance sheet has a certain structure. Most of the time it's by account groups. Within those accounts groups, let's say fixed assets, general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, banking, treasury, etc. You have all the accounts. Now, some of these groups you want to reconcile in one. For example, fixed assets, it can be that you want to reconcile it in one, but your suspense accounts or your intermediate accounts you want to reconcile on the individual basis. So that's basically a hierarchy you're going to build in our solution, and the moment you have built it, you can deploy it through your organization, and by each account group you define how many roles you want to have active. So it all starts with the preparer starts doing his or her job, then it moves to the reconciler. The moment it's completed by the reconciler, it can move to the reviewer, and at the end it ends up at the account owner, and the account owner can review what his previous colleagues have done to that process. Now in real life we can see that a lot of people are storing documentation. For example, you can see this little closet. So we have the general ledger activities, accounts payable, accounts receivable, inventory, goods in transit, work in process, profit center accounting. So you have all these different processes. And what we do, instead of putting it printed hard copy out of the SAP system and store it in the closet, or maybe you are a little bit more enhanced and you store it on a network folder, and we basically store everything behind the templates we have defined earlier. And Runbook is fully integrated into the SAP system, so all the documents will stay into your SAP system. So they will not move into a cloud solution where you need to export and import data out of your SAP system and bring it back. It's fully integrated in your SAP system. Now it allows the management to have the full status overview. How far are we? Where do we see bottlenecks? Where do we have a lot of suspense accounts which are not on zero? So we already expect some issues in that. So maybe these people need to focus a little bit more on the general ledger accounts. We also have the backup person. He is waiting to jump in. So the moment one of these people are getting sick, he can jump in and take over because we have the fixed backup functionality. And at the end, this gentleman is always waiting. Show me what you have done on a certain moment of time. So this is the auditor. So the moment some of these activities are being performed and signed off, the auditor can start doing his or her job. Now, and each of these persons has his own personal view, his personal My General Ledger account. So what we have done against that general ledger mapping, let's say I'm responsible for fixed assets. Fixed assets has 10 general ledger accounts. This person is only responsible for 5, so she can run her My Steps or My Accounts list. It will list out all the accounts that she is responsible for, and she can basically follow the process, attach the evidence, and the auditor can basically review her activities the moment this step is signed off. So in general, this is what Runbook offers. So what can we do? We can do risk reporting on general ledger accounts. We can automatically check certain accounts. For example, if you have suspense accounts, if you have no line items, Runbook can check it automatically for you and will sign off. You can determine your retention period because we are integrated in SAP, and we can auto-reconcile these accounts against live data. So because we are integrated, let's say the shared service center need to do a reconciliation, maybe controllers are submitting an accrual. That accrual is being posted into your system, and the shared service center people are being updated that there are some new line items on their accounts and which they need to reconcile. Now, to quickly look at some screens out of the system, I will move into the systems. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I need to speed up a little bit. Accounts reconciliation module is also integrated into the SAP system. So it has also a transaction code like in SAP. I now want to look at my account, so I select my accounts. You can also access this by a transaction code. I will look at period 2 of year 2012. You can see it in here as well in the header 2012. Period 2, this is my user ID, this is my name, and this is the current date. As you can see, I am responsible for quite some accounts. And so we have a reconciliation area, but I will explain it a little bit later. I will move into this account, so account 126 of reconciliation area CH18. The moment I move into this account, I can see my reconciliation template. So we have a fiscal year, a reconciliation area, so it can be one company code or a list of company codes. So that's the master data you need to set up once. You have your account item that can exist of one general ledger account, or in this case a set of general ledger accounts. So in this case, the moment I reconcile account item 1, I automatically reconcile on the underlying general ledger accounts. I can assign a risk level to an account. I can add a responsibility group, and within that group you assign the normal SAP users, and for each user you predefine what the role of that user is. So dependent whether you activate those 4 roles or only 2, you assign the roles to the users. You can build in the success criteria for the auto reconciliation. So for example, if this has been a suspense account, if I have line items and my account is not 0, the system can check it automatically for me. The moment it is, it will rate it automatically as green. If it's not, it rated as red or yellow based on the severity of the result, and send me an email. Now, because we are integrated in SAP, we can read the opening balance, debit, the credit, the total balance, the currency of the accounts, and the reconciled balance, so basically the expected value, and Runbook can automatically calculate the value at risk. So based on this, the shared service center and the people within the organization know what they need to do. They know how to execute, which accounts are assigned to them, and from management perspective or ownership, you can always run reports to see how far the reconciliation is and where the pain points are, either on reconciliation area, account item, responsibility group, or value at risk. So you can predetermine where you want to put all the effort in, where you can see the risk area up front. And because of time, we will move on to the last part. So the moment you have documented everything into the system, it can be that your auditor don't want to have access to your SAP system, but they want to have it on an external file, and we can export the data either to a CD-ROM or export the data to a memory stick, for example. Now at the end, quick highlight of the reporting. Since we are in SAP, I have shown you some of the online real-time reports, but we can also make use of the BW. So for example, this is an example of one of our customers who are running a shared service center organization. This screenshot is from last year. So they have the global perspective and the shared service centers. And the moment I want to drill down to a shared service center, I can view different processes and how they are performing. So as long as you keep the data in Runbook, you build it up with your master data, it's easily to create it. These kind of reports and do mapping, and in BW you are quite flexible to build your own queries and to basically consolidate data. Now, one of the last slides is to give you an idea of what you can do with Runbook. These are some statistics of one of our clients for closing. So they have 510 steps, 96 are operational, 31 are transactional, and 367 are programs. Out of them, 90 are programmed with invariant, now in this case dynamically, with a batch job, that means scheduled in background. Some of them are executed manually, but a lot of steps, 243, are using our automated technology. So basically it does the check automatically for you. So you can see that you can really reduce on the manual activities the moment you start working with the report verification. Now they also have 11 milestones and they still have 5 jobs in their external scheduling solution. Now then the last slide, implementation. I always get a lot of questions about implementation and how quickly can you implement this. Now, since we are fully integrated in SAP and we store all the data basically in SAP, or if you are using a content server on your content server, we can quite easily implement quite fast. It's not like a typical SAP project where you need to do a lot of customizing. Runbook is an out-of-the-box SAP solution, and so it's quick to implement. We have Excel upload functionality, so basically you define your whole closing schedule in Excel. We have a certain template which you can use, and as long as you stick to the template, it's really easy to upload it. We have the template for our closing, for reconciliation, internal control, and of course also for our master data. So basically you can prepare everything in Excel, and the moment you are ready, then you upload everything into the system, and that's a one-time event. So the moment you have uploaded into the system, then you are going to work with Runbook, you're going to maintain it in Runbook itself. So the moment you need to change some steps, then you do it directly into the system. The moment you have a lot of changes, then you can always make a download and re-upload also changes. But my advice is only do it the moment you have a lot of changes. And at the end, we can also bring in our best practices. As mentioned before, we have quite some customers using our solution on a global scale, and based on that we have also gained a lot of experience out of our previous implementations, which we can share with you. Now, looking at time, we were running a little bit behind, so unfortunately we don't have time for questions. If you have any questions, please send it by mail to me. My email address is omar.klier@runbook.com, or you can also go to our website, or you send it to info@runbook.com, and then we will come back as soon as possible. Thank you all for joining, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. And now for the US, have a nice afternoon. For Asia, have a nice evening, and for Europe, have a nice afternoon/evening. Thank you all for joining, and see you next time.